What's up, marketers? In today's video, I'm going to be answering one of your frequently asked questions, which is, why do I always stack my interest targeting? To be clear, I almost always do this for my lookalikes too. Now, for those of you who are new to my channel and perhaps new to Facebook ads, essentially what this means is when I'm creating a prospecting ad set and I'm using interest targeting, instead of testing these interests one at a time, I actually stack my interests into a single ad set. Now, before I dive into the reasons why I stack my interest targeting, I want to give some background on why this question seems to be such a big deal and why I actually think this is the wrong question to be asking. So the history of single interest targeting. Over the last 2 to 3 years, gurus on YouTube have pushed this idea of single interest ad sets, which means that if they were using interest targeting on Facebook, they were doing so one at a time. So say they were targeting people with an interest of yoga. They would then break out all possible interests into one ad set, like yoga pants, Lululemon, Bikram yoga, Hatha yoga, yoga mat, and so on. And the reason why these gurus claim to have done this is because if you saw good results coming out of one of these interests, then you would know exactly where it came from, which in theory sounds really good, right? We all want the strongest data possible and to know as much about our customers as we can. But here's the thing. Talented agencies in 2021 do not do this. In fact, this idea of hyper-segmenting your audiences goes completely against modern-day Facebook best practices. Now, I think this is the wrong question to be asking because I think your interest targeting should be a really small fraction of what you're actually testing on the platform. You should be mostly concentrating on testing your creatives, which I always do with a broad ad set. Because when you find a creative that works with a broad audience, then it is much more scalable. Now, I've said my piece, I've given you some background, now I'm going to dive into the 5 reasons why I always stack my interest targeting. So, number 1, the results are better with broad audiences and they're much more scalable, like I just said. So a few years ago, I used to plug away by testing my interests one by one in these single interest ad sets, and it almost never worked out, even like 3 or 4 years ago. But now in 2021, Facebook truly works better with broader, bigger audiences. The days of keeping your audiences to 2 million to 4 million people in a single ad set are over. Having a specific number of people in your ad set is no longer considered a best practice. In fact, now the bigger the audience you have, the more likely the algorithm is to find people who are going to be your best customers. And number 2, when you stack your interests, you are actively guarding against audience overlap. Now, while audience overlap isn't as big of a deal as many marketers make it out to be, if you are segmenting your interest targeting one by one and there's a lot of similarities in these audiences, you are almost certainly wasting money. The probability of having someone who has an interest in yoga with an interest of Bikram yoga or yoga pants or yoga mat is incredibly high. So you are almost certainly targeting the same people in each of these audiences, which leads me to my next point. Number 3, when you stack your audiences, you are creating a stronger audience. So let's take a look at those yoga audiences again. When you combine them into an audience like this, I believe that Facebook takes these audiences and looks for the people who have overlapping interests first. So even if your audience is massive, like 100 million people, what it's actually going to do is find the people who have the most overlapping interests that are the most likely to convert. And once it uses its signals to determine what the best audiences in your audience stack actually are, then it's going to start prioritizing them. So in this scenario, Facebook is literally doing your job for you if you were trying to segment your interests out one by one to determine the best one. Facebook is already going to do that if you stack your interests into one ad set. So you do not need to worry about weeding out the underperforming interests. And number 4, I know I've mentioned this in a few different places in this video, but it's so important, I'm going to give it its own bullet point. When you are using bigger and broader audiences, you are in a much better position to scale. And because of this, you don't have to continuously rely on testing your audiences one by one, hoping that you strike gold. With bigger and broader audiences, you can concentrate more on testing your creative, which is the biggest lever that you can pull on Facebook ads in 2021. And number 5, Finally, do not data for data's sake. Now, I want to address the guru's concern head on about knowing where your customers are actually coming from, because in theory, that sounds like a really great idea. But the problem here is that it's not scalable. So say that you decided to segment out all of your interests one by one, and you found that your best interest was Bikram yoga. But then when that interest starts to die off, where do you go from there? Well, you would start by testing more audiences that are similar to Bikram yoga, right? But did that single interest really guide you so much to know that your customers prefer Bikram yoga over yoga pants? I highly doubt it. Instead, what I would have done is I would have combined all of my yoga interests into a single ad set, which then would have compounded my learnings and put me into a much better position to just scale vertically. Which means I would just simply be increasing my budget as long as results held or even got better. So some final notes here. In general, I do all of my creative testing with broad audiences because I know that if I can create creative that performs on a broad audience, then it is much more scalable. Despite the fact that broad audiences are almost always better, in 2021, I have found some easy wins by introducing stacked interests into my prospecting campaigns. Interest targeting is by no means dead in 2021. But hyper segmenting your interests by singular ad sets, I would say definitely is. And to be clear, not everyone agrees with me, so this is just my opinion. Additionally, I want to be clear about how I'm actually stacking my interest targeting. I'm not stacking all possible interests that I think my customer avatar would like into a singular audience. I'm segmenting them by categories or even by different customer avatars. So I'm not going to be combining all possible interests into a single ad set. I have tried it before, mixed results, but I have seen the best results coming out of when I'm using specific categories, like doing a publication category. Or if I am going to be testing something like yoga, then I'm going to be using Lululemon, yoga pants, yoga mat, hatha yoga, Bikram yoga, like all of those things that are related to the core interest of yoga. I just wanted to make that clear. Finally, we know that Facebook is actually going to be weaning us off interest targeting altogether. That's at least my prediction because they are taking away audience insights, I believe in June 2021. And that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know so many of you have been asking me this question. I hope that I've answered it. And if you don't agree with me, please leave me a comment below. I'm super curious about this subject because it seems to be very polarizing. And to be honest, that's totally fine. We're all different and our media buying strategies are all different. But this is just the way that I see things. So thanks for hanging out with me for today. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.